Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to do a quick video about nixconfig and Git. Many of you saw my configuration hosted on GitHub and GitLab and those sorts of places, and I've gotten some questions. How do I get this set up with Git and stuff like that. So today we're just going to walk through a sort of quick setup of taking your config and hosting it on GitHub or GitLab. And near the end of this, I want to talk about some of the special interactions that Nix and Nix configs can have with Git, including allowing you to run software with a single Nix command without having to actually install it, and how you can sort of incorporate this into your own config if you're using a flake. Now, this is not necessarily going to be a Git tutorial. So if you're interested in learning more about Git and how it works and all of the amazing things that you can do with it, there's plenty of amazing guides on how Git works out there on YouTube. So go look for them. There's people that, understand Git to like a much higher degree than I do that will be able to explain it a lot better. But what I'll provide you with here is just a quick sequence of steps you can go through to get your config hosted on a remote like GitHub or GitLab, and then that brief discussion about how you can set up these special integrations with Nix and Git and some of the gotchas between Nix and Git. So I guess without further ado, I'm going to navigate to my old tutorial VM from like way back long ago, and we'll just start from there. So at this point, you of course have some dot files, and if you've been following my previous tutorials, you probably have some directory like dot files with some configuration in it, configuration.nix, the home.nix, flake.nix if you've enabled that, maybe some modules here and there, and all of that. If you've kept your configuration in /etc/nixos, that's totally fine. A lot of this will still work, but there are just a few caveats about it. So what do you do to start out? Well, to start out, you're going to make sure that you have Git installed. So you can open up your configuration.nix and just make sure that you have it installed. So wherever environment.system packages, or you can install it via home manager, that's fine. So I'm just going to add it to the configuration.nix for now so that it is installed. So here we go. Sudo nixos build switch. There we go. So now we have Git. So now with Git installed, we're not actually going to do anything with Git until we've properly configured it. If we don't spend the time properly configuring it, we're going to have some problems later on. So there's two configurations that are mandatory, and then there's a third one that I just recommend based on how most Git remotes, which are like, the sites that host your Git repo, based on how they work, I recommend a third thing. So the first two, these are the mandatory ones that you need to make, is you need to tell Git about your name and your email. Now, technically, these can be totally fake, both of them. This isn't the same as like giving your email to a service to sign up. We're not signing up to Git. We're just telling Git who we are, in a sense, because the way Git works is it sort of takes these snapshots of all of your files and all of your config and whatever's in the repo. It'll take these snapshots, and every time it takes a snapshot, it attaches a name and an email to it, so that you can go back in the Git history and tell who was doing what on the specific repository. If you don't have Home Manager, the quickest and easiest way to do this is probably just to type in the commands like you would in a normal Linux distribution, and those two commands are git config -- global user.name, and this is where you'd put your name. So I'd put my name right there. And then the second one would be the email address, so it's very similar. Git config -- global user.email, and then you'd give your email address. So I'll just say example@example.com. There we go. So with those two options set, Git will now work. But this is NixOS, and we want to be doing things declaratively. So if you have Home Manager, which you should, you can navigate to your home.nix, and we can instead set this up in a more declarative fashion. So to do that, we're going to go to some place in our configuration, or wherever we're putting our options, and we'll write a definition for the programs.git option. And this will be an attribute set. And the first thing we need to do is enable equals true. That will tell Home Manager, manage my git.files for me. And then we pass in this sort of the same two things, the username and the email. So username equals, and then you put username, and then user email equals, there we go, example at example.com. So with that out of the way, we can synchronize our Home Manager config like so, and Git will be configured declaratively. Now those are the two mandatory options, so you must configure those either of those two ways, either on the command line or in your home.nix or in Home Manager. The next setting is one that is not technically required, but I've had issues with pushing my Git repos to GitHub or GitLab in the past when I didn't set this option. So I just like to set this straight out of the bat. And that is the init.default branch option. So I'm just gonna show you the warning that it's going to give you. Don't follow this command yet because you'll run into some problems. But if you run git init, which would make a Git repo, it's going to give you this big warning message telling you that you haven't configured a initial default branch name. The initial default branch name in Git is called the master branch, but most of the popular Git hosting sites use main as the default branch name. Now, again, I've had problems pushing to Git remotes because if the remote only has a branch named main, and locally you only have a branch named master, it's gonna like complain and tell you it's wrong and stuff. So it's just kind of annoying. So I just set it to be sort of like the same thing that's there, so that it's just easier to work with and quicker. So in order to do this, you can do it, again, two ways. You can either run the command that is given here, which is git config -- global, and then init.default branch, and then give the name. I'm going to give it the name main. So you can either do that, or you can go to your Home Manager. So real quick, just to save us a hassle, I'm going to remove that. You can go to Home Manager, and we'll add one more config option here, and that is the extra config, which is another attribute set inside of this attribute set. And we will pass init.default branch and set that to main. And once we synchronize our Home Manager config, we will be all good to go. So with all that configuration out of the way, you can now navigate to wherever your dot files are and run git init. It shouldn't give you any warning messages now. And now it says initialized empty Git repository in wherever it is. On a side note, if you keep all of your config in /etc/nixos, or if you have your configuration in a folder that is owned by root, there are just a few extra steps that you're going to have to do. So in that case, I'll actually navigate to /etc/nixos, and there they are. That's just the sort of default config that's in there. So if you want Git to work this way, and you want it to be easiest to work with, I would say, and you don't want to run your Git commands as root, you can do this. So before it was talking about the .git directory, which is necessary for Git to run. And so if we want to run Git as a normal user inside of this folder owned by root, we can do sudo make directory.git. So we make the Git directory before initializing the repo. Then we change the ownership of this to whatever your username is. So be, in my case, Libre Phoenix. And then we change the group The default group for the users in NixOS is just users. So we change that. And now we can run git init again. And then at this point, we also need to do one more thing. If we try to run any git commands, it'll give you this error that says detected dubious ownership. That's because we have this thing owned by root, and then there's the git directory is owned by us, and so it's weird. So it just wants us to add this as a safe directory, which you can configure that with this command right here. So something like this. Or if you want to do this in a declarative fashion, like I do, you would navigate to your home.nix, and you would add this as another extra config option. So we'd pass something like init dot oops, what am I doing? Safe dot directory equals, and then the path to the actual directory where the dot files are stored. And if we go ahead and synchronize that again, oops, that's an error that we'll come into later. So if we go and do that, and we add the safe directory, we can now run, we'll be able to run git commands like normal, which we'll talk about that more later. So in any case, whatever your situation is, I'm going to be doing this work in the dot files directory, and I'll reinitialize this again because I had to nuke it for a split moment there, which we'll talk about why that was in a little while. Now, to just go over the basic workflow for Git, there's basically 3 steps that you do every time you make additions or changes to any of the files. There's these 3 steps. So the first step is called staging. Then you commit the staged changes, and then you would push those changes to a remote. So you can sort of think of it like this. Okay, so you have your dot files, and you might be making these changes to it, a bunch of these changes. Once you've aggregated a bunch of changes and you want to make a new snapshot, you stage all the changes that you want to be included in the snapshot, and then the snapshot is a commit that you're committing to it. This is the snapshot, and then it gets set in stone, so to say. Then once you have that new snapshot set up, you push the whole set of snapshots to the remote, and that would be something like GitHub or GitLab, so that what is on your machine and what is on GitHub or GitLab are the exact same. They have the exact same set of snapshots, so they're identical in a sense. So how do we do all those steps? Well, the first step, that is the staging step. So that is going to be done with the git add command. Now, when you're starting out here for your first commit, you'll probably just pass git add star, which means add everything. If you want to add individual files, you can do that as well. So you could do something like git add configuration.nix. Nix, there we go. Git add home.nix, for example. If you wanted to stage the changes or add like a specific new file, that would be how you do it. So that would be them being staged, but they're not in a snapshot yet. We could still unstage these or unsnapshot them if we wanted to, but they're not committed yet. In order to commit them, we're going to use the git commit command. So git commit. Now this requires the -m option, which is the commit message. And so this would be a little message that goes along with the actual change. So a very, very brief description of what the change was, or even better, why you made the change, because you can go into the code and read what the changes were, but you might not remember why you made those changes. So for this one, I always make my first commits just say first commit. So git commit -m first commit in quotes, and then it'll tell you about all the changes. So we literally added everything that is in here. And now this last step will be to push these to a remote. Now, before we push these to the remote, we have to configure the remote. in order to do this, you're going to have to select a remote. So the most popular one out there by far is GitHub. That's where most people are with their Git repos. There's also GitLab. Codeberg is another nice one. There's also SourceHut. GitHub is owned by Microsoft, so if you don't like the big tech giants all that much, you might consider GitLab. Codeberg is actually a non-profit, and they're highly devoted to free and open source software. SourceHut, while I don't think it is a non-profit, they are very, very boss, free and open source friendly, all that good stuff. So select a remote of choice, whatever one you'd like to use. I'm just gonna show this using GitHub because it's the most popular one. So in any case, you'll navigate to whatever it is. You'll sign up or you'll sign up if you don't have an account already, or log in. And what you'll want to do is set up an SSH key. So in order to do that, you're gonna go to your remote of choice, and you'll have to find some sort of settings menu. On GitHub, you just go to your sort of profile picture here. You'll go to settings, I believe, and then you're gonna go to SSH and GPG keys. So we're gonna add an SSH key. So we'll go to new SSH key, and you'll need to give it a title. I'm just going to call this one test VM, and I'm actually going to destroy this SSH key later on. The key part is something that you have to generate on your machine. So to do that, you're going to run SSH-keygen. It'll give you a default path, which this is fine. And it'll also optionally offer you to give a passphrase. This passphrase is sort of just like a local encryption of the actual key. So if a hacker managed to steal the actual file associated with the keys, like the actual private key, they still may not be able to get into it unless they brute forced that passphrase. So once you do this, they should be in .ssh, and there's two of them. There's id_rsa and id_rsa.pub. Now this is extremely important. You have to copy the public key, the contents of it, into here. Anyone and everyone can see your public key and not hack you. But the private key is like a password. So if anyone gets access to the contents of the private key, then they can pretend to be you. That is sort of the proof that you are who you are. So you'll want to open up or cat that file. So cat rsa.pub, and then grab the contents of this and paste them in here. I think that that didn't paste. Did that paste all that well? Actually, it did. That pasted just fine with this terminal. So that's fine. So you just copy and paste that in, and once you have that there, you should be able to add SSH key, and this will just make things a lot easier for us later. And SSH keys are generally more secure than just passwords. I mean, I think these default ones are like 4096 bits or something. Maybe, I don't know if that's the default, but they're much longer and more complex than just like a normal password that you'd have to remember and enter on the command line every time you do a Git operation. So once you have the SSH key generated and you've set the settings on your Git remote, we are ready to create a repo on that remote. So on GitHub, you can just go to create new here. New repository is what we're going to want to do. And I'm just going to call this nixos config git test, just as an example. And you'll want to make this a blank repo. So you don't want to add a README. You can add that later yourself. And so just make sure it's blank and create the repository. Once you do this, some of these sites like GitHub or GitLab will give you a quick blurb of how to actually get started. But I'm explaining it to you, so you could also follow along with this. So remember how we set up that SSH key? You can now go to SSH here and grab the SSH git clone link. So we'll just copy that. And we're going to use this to configure the remote. So if we navigate back to wherever our dot files are, so I have them here. So for me, dot files. We're now going to run git remote add. Then we have to give the remote a name. Most people use something like origin if they're only pushing it to one place. I actually push my dot files to multiple places, so I actually just give it the name of the place, like GitHub, whatever it is. Remember that name. So we give the remote a name, and then we give it the flown link, or the Git link in this case here. So there it is. We have a remote. At this point, all we need to do now to push our one commit that we made to this is git push. Then we put the remote name. So in that case, that was the name here that we gave it here, GitHub. So I will put GitHub. And then we put the branch name. If you're using the default master branch name, you would put master. If you configured it like me and you're running have a main branch, you would give it the name main. Whoops, I cannot type. You put main. So that is the command to push all of the commits that we've made to, in this case, GitHub or wherever that remote is located. So we do that. The first time you do this, you gotta do an authenticity check. Yes is fine. Then put in your passphrase if you put a passphrase for your SSH key. And then it'll run. And if we go and refresh here, look at that. We have a repository, which is awesome. So at this point, every time you make a change to a file, you'll stage the changes, make a commit, and then push those commits onto your remote. So for example, if I went here and, I don't know, went to the home.nix and I don't know, this is change for Git demonstration purposes. There we go. Now I could go through the whole process again. So git add, I'll just add everything because, why not? Git commit -m, another commit for demonstration purposes. And then I would push it. So git push, GitHub was my remote name, main is my branch name, and there we go. There we go, another commit for demonstration purposes. There it is. So we have now 2 commits. Now at this point, you might be wondering, gosh, do I have to type in all of these commands and like all of this stuff every single time I want to make a git commit? And like, what if I like make a few what if I make a bunch of changes and I want to like separate out the specific changes into separate commits so that they're sort of grouped together nicely and it makes sense? How do I do that on Git? How do I do this advanced stuff? Well, you could go and watch a bunch of Git tutorials and learn about all of the amazing command line options that Git has. Or you could be like me and use a Git front end. If you want a sort of easier way to work with Git that's maybe more visual and helps you understand it better, you need a Git front end. Now, to show you an example of a Git front end, I'm an Emacs user. So on Emacs, we have a tool called Magit. It's like magic, but it's Magit. So if I go to my Emacs real quick, here are my actual dot files. And this is the Magit window. And this is a nice sort of visual overview of the Git repository. If I go and make a change, like, I don't know, maybe I'll edit my home.nix, for example. Here are a bunch of unnecessary changes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, all that meaningless comments right there. And if I go back to my Git window, it'll show, okay, these are some unstaged changes. And I can view the unstaged changes and see this visual representation of what is new. I can choose to stage these changes with with a key press. I can unstage them with a key press. I can commit with a key press. I don't actually want to commit that though. That's I don't need that. I can even do things where I just like click around and only stage like part of the change. So, well, let me unstage this real quick. I can just stage like only half of this if I wanted to. So you can see there's I only picked these ones, and like these ones are still unstaged, so they wouldn't be part of the commit. You can do all these things inside of command line Git, but it's kind of like more complex. I think in order to do this, you probably have to pass like line numbers and all sorts of random stuff to the Git commit and or the Git command, and that it just gets needlessly complicated. So I recommend, unless you like really want to learn like the internals of Git, I recommend that you go find a Git front end. I know not all of you are Emacs users, obviously. So there are some other ones that are great. In my research, I found a tool called LazyGit. I haven't really tried it myself, but if you're like a Neo Vim user, definitely check out LazyGit. It's like a terminal UI Git front end that it probably works kind of similarly to Magit here, but it's you know, TUI and stuff. And if you prefer like a GUI, a graphical one, a good free and open source one is called Ungit. It's you just run it in your repo, and then I think you like navigate to like a local host link in your browser, and it has this really nice graphical overview showing you the Git repo. I can even show you, if you get more advanced into Git, it could show you, you know, all the diverging branches and how they might merge back together and all this fancy stuff. So those are two other ones that I recommend. Several IDEs will also have native, like built-in Git support, like I know Visual Studio Code does. I'm pretty sure Kate from KDE has built-in Git support. So definitely save yourself some confusion and try out a Git front end. If you're new to Git, I guarantee it'll help you learn Git a lot better than trying to figure out everything on the command line. But anyways, back to our discussion of the Git repo. One thing that you may want to be aware of is how do you like restore the Git repo to a new system if like something happens to your system. Like, so for example, if I go here and I just nuke my .files directory, let's see here, sudo. Okay, I think I'm oh yeah, I have this mounted externally, so it's gonna complain. What if I just nuke everything in here? Sudo rm all. Hold up. Am I like stupid? Star dot? Oh, I already nuked everything. Okay, well, I nuked everything. So now that I've nuked everything and I lost all my .files, how do I get them back? Well, we can use the command git clone to clone the remote Git repository onto the local machine. So we can go ahead and grab the git clone link again. So this is the same link that we used for the remote. And all we got to do is run git clone the link. And then if you want to add like an actual directory name to this, you can. So I'm going to put .files. Otherwise, it's going to be the name of the repo. Like in my case, it'd be nixos-config-git-test. So I want it to be in the .files directory. So I'm going to do that. There it is, cloning into .files. And there it is. We are back in business. Now, one more thing that you might want to be aware of, whenever you do this, it might automatically name the remote something different. So in this case, it defaults to be named origin. If you want to change this, you can, of course, run git remote rm and then put that in. And then just the previous step, git remote add, give it a name. I'll call it GitHub. And then put that same link back in. And then we're back to where we were before. Now, this is something I've mentioned in Nix videos before, but it definitely needs to be mentioned again now. There are some common errors that you may encounter now that your Nix config is stored in a Git repository. Nix knows when your config is stored in a Git repository. Now, there's a big gotcha that you'll want to be aware of as especially if you're making module files in your Nix config. So, for example, I have this this hyperland.nix file, and that's a module file that goes along, I believe, with my home.nix in this case, right? That's yeah, there it is. /hyperland.nix. I'm gonna make another random module file. So vim random.nix. We'll just give this a very bare bones structure. What should I put in here? Actually, I think I can just put nothing, and it'll still give us the error. So I've added this new module file, and conceivably, like you would have some configuration in there. And now I want to go add this module file to my home.nix. So /random.nix. And now I want to evaluate my new config. So home manager switch -- flake. There we go. Now this is the error that is confusing at first. So it's going to tell us that random.nix, no such file or directory. It doesn't exist. But hey, if I run ls, there it is. There's my random.nix file. So like, why is it making this mistake? Well, what is happening here, Nix knows that your config is stored in a Git repository. And it also knows when you haven't staged or committed files. So if it finds a file that has never been staged or never been committed, like it doesn't currently exist in the Git history or the Git staging area, if it doesn't exist there, it will refuse to evaluate a configuration that depends on that file. And this is a feature, not a bug. The reason for this is you could have a bunch of your configuration depending on this one file that you forgot to stage and you forgot to commit. And then when you go to rebuild your configuration on some other system, it is going to be missing this file. And so it won't be able to actually recreate your config because it is missing the file, when it could have told you it was missing the file and refused to evaluate. So the way you fix this, of course, is by adding it to the staging area. So we do git add, then whatever new file it is, like that. And at this point, it will evaluate. So we can run that now. It'll work. There we go. But again, don't forget that you still have to commit this. So git commit m added useless file for demonstration purposes. And then you still probably want to push it. So git push GitHub main for my case. Again, that being the repository or the remote name and then the branch name. Now that's the sort of Nix and Git interaction gotcha, but there's a really cool Git and Nix interaction that deals with flakes. And this is where you can actually set up your config repository to allow you to like run scripts or actually just run software in general with a single command on a Nix OS distribution without having to actually install the software. And to sort of give you an idea of what this means, I'm gonna go back to Emacs and to my my legit config. Here we go, and show you this. So I made a short video just showing this off a few days ago, but I went ahead for my system and I wrote this this little auto install script that essentially clones my repository to .dot files where I like my config files to be, and then it goes through the process of building the configuration and then switching into it, both the system configuration with NixOS rebuild and home manager as well with a home manager switch. Now this whole thing here is a shell script, but I have this integrated in my Flake in this section here where I have it sort of declared as a full-blown like application in a sense. It's just a shell script, but I'm declaring it as this application, and it's to the point where I can run this command, this install script, on any NixOS system with just a single command using this tool called nix-run. Now, you might be wondering at this point, well, that's really cool that you can do this fancy Nix magic, but why don't you just like curl the script and pipe it into bash? Wouldn't that be simpler than doing all this Nix configuration? Well, yes, that would be simpler, but the cool aspect of this is that you can add runtime inputs to your script. Now, my script is kind of boring at the moment. I actually only have one runtime input, and it's actually not really doing anything because Git is required to just start it. So, but in any case, you can imagine that you could put any package as a runtime input. So, for example, if you wanted to, you could make this a Python script, have Python and all of the Python dependencies be part of your runtime inputs, and then you can run that Python script on any NixOS system, even a NixOS system that doesn't have Python installed. And you can basically do this with any kind of any programming language, Python, Python, Ruby, whatever. And even with like a shell script, you could add command line dependencies. Say you need a specific command line program for that script. You need that to be there in order for the script to run. Well, you just include it right here, and it will be automatically run with those dependencies like pre-packaged just to run the single command, which is really cool. I'm not going to get too needlessly into the details with this, but rather than just to sort of show you about this and then have, then if you want to set something up like this yourself, I'll of course include some links to my blog post that has a little bit more detail on this, and some more links on really how you can get this to work and do a lot of cool things. So basically the TLDR of this is you go to your flake.nix, you go to your outputs, and for your outputs you probably have a definition for home configurations and a definition for NixOS configuration. You're going to add two more definitions like this, the first one being packages and the second one being apps. Now, I stole this function here. I have this function called for all systems and nix packages for. These two functions are functions I stole from, I was studying this repo called Plasma Manager. It's a declarative KDE Plasma configuration for NixOS. And just looking through their flake, they actually use these functions, and I actually just stole them, which you'll want to declare them up here, where you want to declare them in your let binding before your output. So you have a let binding with for the outputs, and here are these. So we have for all systems, so it'll be this one here, and then nix packages for is that function right there. Again, my config and my blog post will be linked in the description below. And in order for this to work, you need to have a list of supported system architectures. So I just added these three. I think I just copied those straight out of Plasma Manager, just straight up there. So that would be like the list of system architectures that should be able to run the script. So you set all that up in your let binding. And now at this point, we can get into the fun details of declaring the actual packages and the apps. So packages are going to be created for every single one of those systems. I'm using this again, this like function here, and so we have to declare at least two things. So we'll want to declare a default package and then an actual package. So in my case, I set up an install package, which for a NixOS configuration, like .files repository, this would probably be the thing that you're looking to do. So you would have your install equal, and I use packages.write shell application. So this allows you to give it, so you give it a name, you give it a list of runtime inputs, which would be some packages from Nix packages, and then you actually write some text. If you want to have the text be an actual script that is external to the flake, you would use this right here. You'd use this substitution sort of method with the $sign and then the squiggly brackets. and then this being, whatever arguments are passed into it. Or if you wanted to just write your entire install script in here rather than in this, external file, you could do that as well. Once you've done that, you declare apps, and so you'll need to declare a default app and an app that is associated with the package that you created. So in this case, install. So this gets the type of app, and then you have to give it a definition for program, which we can set up by just setting it to the actual install package that gets created here using self.packages.system. So getting the system architecture, then the install package, and then where it is, which is in /bin/install. So once you have set all this up, again, you can essentially just copy the basic idea of this here and throw it into your config. Obviously changing the text for the install script and the name if you want to in all the appropriate places. Once you have this set up, you would be able to run this script essentially directly from Git. And I'll show you in my install notes what it is. So in this case here, I have my sort of the main version of my Git repo is on GitLab. So the command to run this would be nix run GitLab : then my username, which is just Libre Phoenix, and then the repo is nixos-config. So I just run that, and it would run the install script that I have set up, and automatically including any dependencies that I declare in there, just sort of automatically. Now, this being said, running this on a new system is not going to work out of the box. The reason being is that this whole feature is sort of an experimental thing, and it also requires Git to be installed. Git is not installed by default on a fresh install of NixOS. So if you want to get it down to a single command, I have it run like this. So this is sort of my full formulation for how I get this to sort of all work together here. You run nix shell-p git, so that puts you in a sub shell with git available. Then you give it the command nix run. We got to pass some experimental features. It requires the experimental features nix-command and flakes, and then we just pass the last part here, which is the actual name of the repo. So you could set this up for yourself, of course, changing the repo name, and of course writing your own install script, because you may have a slightly different setup, a slightly different way of installing the dot files to your system. But this is another cool Nix feature that, if you really get into using it, can be very, very powerful. Anyways, this video is dragged on for quite a while now, so I think we're just going to end it here. As always, I hope you found the video helpful, and I hope it helps you set up your NixOS config on Git if you have not done that already. If you liked the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more NixOS content. If you disliked the video, please leave a dislike and let me know why you disliked it and how I can improve. If you guys want me to go in a little more depth of some of the Git flakes interaction, and maybe do a few more, maybe get into that a little more in depth rather than just looking at my example, definitely let me know. I'll probably make a future video about that eventually. Big thanks to all of you that have been financially supporting me with YouTube memberships or LiberaPay or Patreon. I really, really appreciate all of you for your financial support. And so for everyone, if you've been finding my content useful and it's been helping you learn NixOS, Linux, technology, please consider supporting me via the YouTube memberships, Patreon, or LiberaPay. Links will be down in the description below. Anyways, that'll be it for today, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. See you next time.